Hello Internet and welcome to another episode of Experimental Cataclysm. This is a show where I talk about recent development for the experimental version of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. As always, we've got some interesting stuff to talk about, so let's just jump into it. I do want to say I am a little bit under the weather, so I may sound a little bit more nasally or saliva-y than I normally do. Sorry about that, I really won't know till I get into the editing. So first up, I wanted to offer a correction for my last show. We talked about some heavy spoilers, which I don't want to rehash because they're spoilers. But we talked about an enemy that was supposed to disappear and it wouldn't do that in my testing. As such, I complained about it at length and then realized later that it was my own fault because I was debug spawning the enemy and that broke its ability to disappear. Now this actually happens quite a lot in the show. I find out later that there was some flaw in my testing or that I misread something, and I don't typically talk about this, but I do have a lot of difficulty parsing the changes that come to the game. I have a very limited understanding of C++, and as we all know, there are hundreds of changes that happen in any given week. The changelogs are usually posted after I start researching my show, and sometimes they aren't posted at all. Now, I'm not blaming anyone, it's just that the changelogs make it a lot easier to do the show. But just by the way, I'm not blaming anyone. It's a nightmare to search through all the changes of the game. It's not easy at all, and it's a lot of work for someone to put together a changelog. And that's sort of my point. I look through all the changes myself. I miss stuff sometimes things change immediately after I record the episode. All sorts of little problems like that. Going through hundreds of changes and finding them, the 4 or 10 that I want to talk about, is very time consuming. But yeah, anyway, I made a mistake, and sometimes, frankly, I don't want to do the show because it's tedious and difficult to keep up with everything that's going on with the game. Not to mention the editing, which isn't exceptional, but it is very time consuming. I imagine most of you will be understanding of this, but I do feel bad whenever I need to make a correction because of my own lack of understanding. So apologies to Ramza who made the changes that we talked about in the last show. I really do think that they're an interesting addition to the game and I look forward to experiencing them. Anyway, that's a lot of talking, so let's just move on. So first up this week, we have a pretty simple and innocuous change from, I'm going to say Mythos mod. Do you say Mythos or Mythos? Sometimes I say, it doesn't matter. This PR added pill bottles to the game. Now it's not a big change or anything super impactful, but I for one am absolutely sick of finding loose pills in the pockets of zombies. Nobody carries loose pills. I mean, honestly, no one, well, my grandmother does, I guess, but she at least has the sense to put them in a little plastic sandwich bag. Anyway, this adds a few different bottles to the game specifically for the purpose of storing medications and vitamin supplements. There were some concerns in the comments over whether or not it was necessary to add these to the game. Adding multiple bottles does complicate things in some ways. There is no use for them in crafting, for example, because they are their own item rather than being interchangeable with the existing plastic bottles. And although I think that is a valid concern, I don't think it's hugely problematic. Not every plastic bottle needs to be attached to recipes. Some of them can be just disregarded as unsuitable for certain crafts. But anyway, that's a long way of me saying, hey, we've got pill bottles in the game now. And now we just need someone to implement those child safety pill bottles and then prevent all characters under 18 from being able to open them. Is that funny? Probably not, but I'm leaving it in the video, so you're gonna have to deal with it. Next up, we had a series of PRs relating to training NPCs and having them train you. Although there were several, I will mainly be focusing on the one that allows you or NPCs to hold training seminars. Now to boil this down into a simple explanation, this allows you as the player to hold a seminar teaching nearby NPCs a particular skill. You will also be able to select which NPCs should participate and what skill you'll be teaching. Now there is a cooldown for this, and although I wasn't able to pin down what the cooldown is exactly, after teaching a seminar you will not be able to hold another immediately after. Additionally, you can request that one of your NPC followers be the one who teaches the seminar, which allows you to select yourself for participation as a student. Now in my testing I could not get this to work. They always would decline to start a seminar. So it seems likely that there are some checks behind the scenes. Maybe, they have to have a certain skill level or they have to have a certain level of trust in you as the player. I don't know the cause exactly, but I would encourage you to try it for yourself. Now both the teaching and learning aspect of this means that you will have more direct control over you and your followers' skill levels. Obviously this is pretty beneficial. Being able to target a specific skill for training is always a good thing. Plus you can force your NPCs to sit through what I have to assume is a deeply boring lecture, so the sadist in you will also be satisfied. Now, if you want to teach the seminar yourself, you can do this by using the chat command. I believe it's either lowercase c or capital C, and then selecting to do a seminar. This will allow you to select which NPCs should participate, as well as which skill you're going to be teaching. To get an NPC to teach you, you will actually go into their dialogue tree by talking to them directly, and then asking them to do something for you, which you can then request a seminar. Now, the only other thing I can think that is worth noting here is that these seminars do make you weary. In my first test, I went from no weariness to moderate weariness. Now, this was teaching marksmanship, and then in a separate test later on, I taught a seminar on fabrication, and my weariness did not actually go down, it stayed at fresh. Now, I did update my game between these two tests. It's possible that this was already changed to cause less weariness, or it's possible that skill levels and number of NPCs change the amount of weariness you will gain. And yeah, that's about all I've got there. Anyone who has watched my Let's Plays of Cataclysm knows I don't really play with NPCs, but the fact is that they are getting more and more valuable as the game continues to develop. Things like this that allow you to manipulate their skills and shape them into, whatever type of character you want them to be makes them much more appealing. If you're like me and you have not played with NPCs in a long time, I would recommend that you give it another shot. Now, faction camps and NPCs as followers themselves, they can be pretty valuable if you're willing to deal with the grief of, having an AI follow you around. Now, I do believe there's some stuff going on behind the scenes that works on AI in general and improving their thought processes and things like that. Not saying they're perfect, they definitely still have some, if not many, issues, but it's good to give things another chance from time to time and just kind of marvel at the progress. So next up, we have a rework of gun stores. Now, I originally recorded a section for this when I first sat down to make this video. Ultimately, though, I was disappointed both with the change and with how I was expressing my thoughts. So this is probably about my third attempt, I guess, to record and formulate my thoughts, and that is also why the audio might not match up and why this video is probably a day or two late. So I don't really trust myself to talk about this change without being irritable. So I'm going to be vague and quick about it as best I can. This PR made some changes to gun shops, and their cited reasoning was to make gun stores more sensible. It says that in the PR. Some of the changes that they made in this PR were good. I'm not going to deny that or try to paint this as a terrible PR, but one of their changes was to move all ammunition into safes. Now, this doesn't make sense. It's unrealistic that a gun shop with, depending on the size of it, might have tens of thousands of rounds in it, and they're going to move all that to a safe. That just doesn't really make sense. They said that this was to reflect the rounds being in demand and valuable. Now, I'm not going to give an at-length argument explaining why this sounds right in theory, but actually breaks down when you apply logic to it. I'm trying to be brief and trying not to be too mean about it. So instead of talking about this PR, I want to talk about Cataclysm's development in general. I'm sort of over it. We continue seeing people cite realism for changes that they make, and then in the very same PRs, they will then make changes that are completely unrealistic. Now, there's quite a long list, and I could probably come up with, 5 or 10 changes where people claimed realism and then abandoned realism when it doesn't suit them. I'm getting tired of contributors punishing the player and claiming that it's because of realism. It seems like more and more people are only using the term realism when it benefits them and allows them to add suffering to the player, and then they completely ignore it if it would do something that would actually benefit the player. So using the looted shops that we've seen in game, everyone wants to claim realism. Every time I talk about the frustrating lack of unlooted grocery stores, people have arguments about this all the time, and they say it's realistic. That's why this change was made. People talk about raids and looting and panic buying, but when you counter them by offering common sense disagreements, they ignore you and pretend that it doesn't matter because it's the way they want it to be. So yes, would many grocery stores be looted in an apocalyptic situation? Absolutely, of course. Would they be completely devoid of literally any item? Well, absolutely not. That's where it falls apart. There would be food dropped on the floor. There would be gum and magazines and caffeine pills, things that people would not take even if they were desperately looking for real food. But when you bring these things up to contributors or whatever, they just ignore you because it doesn't suit their narrative. It is my opinion that contributors are using these tactics more and more in development. They will cite realism when it allows them to punish the player, and then they will ignore realism when it would benefit the player. Realism is a core tenet of development on this project, and it needs to be applied evenly across the board. Now, contributors, I get that some contributors don't think about game balance. They are focused on adding something new to the game or tweaking something like that. I totally get why some contributors don't focus on balance. Some do, by the way. I'm not throwing everyone under the bus. Some people think very hard about it, but most contributors just show up and add what they want. However, this is not just an issue with the contributors. Sometimes the devs do this as well. And for every one of these unbalanced contributions that come to the game, there is a dev member behind the scenes that reviews it before it gets added. Somebody with merge rights added these things to the game. Now, I view this as a steady decline in the quality of Cataclysm. Now, I could easily list many things about the game that are unbalanced or completely broken, and no one does anything about them. Instead, we continually see new problems added into the game rather than old problems getting fixed. When I sit down to play the game these days, I would say that I run into one of these issues in almost every 20 to 30 minute episode. You can go watch literally any Let's Play on my channel and you have a pretty good chance of picking an episode where you hear me talk about unrealistic monster density or other complete nonsense that exists in the game. And frankly, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I just kind of want to say this out loud, I don't enjoy playing anymore. You know, for the last couple of weeks, every day I wake up thinking about my next Cataclysm series. I already have it planned out. I made a big D&D style chart of random events that I will roll on. I'll roll on this chart every episode. You know, just random events that you would find in like another roguelike game or like Slay the Spire, where you would come across a random event, that kind of thing. Just random stuff like instantly mutating or you find whatever item, or for the duration of the episode you can't wear armor, stuff like that. So I have all that figured out. I made this chart. I just need to sit down and record the episodes. And every morning when I wake up, I think, you know, today's the day I'm going to work on that next series. And then as my day starts rolling, I think about all the things about the game that frustrate me, or I'll follow development and I'll see more unbalanced stuff that's being added and I just decide that I don't want to play. Anyway, this was a long-winded way of me saying that I'm pretty tired of this trend. I'm tired of watching people take things away from the player and claim that it's due to realism. And then you point out why their change is actually unrealistic and everyone gets defensive and ignores you. Realism should be applied evenly across the board. If we're going to have realism as a core tenet in the game development, we need to apply it evenly. And to go back to this specific PR, the choice to add ammo exclusively to safes is a huge hurdle between a new player or early game character and getting bullets. Bullets, by the way, that are already entirely too scarce in the game. Now you can say it's because of looting or panic buying, but there are realistic reasons why there would still be exotic or undesirable ammo left behind. There's absolutely zero reason why a gun shop would be sealed and boarded up and unlooted and there would still be guns on the shelves, stuff everywhere, but all the ammo in the shop would be in a safe. It's actually complete nonsense and it makes me borderline furious. If you had said, oh hey, you know, some gun shops now keep their ammunition in safes, I would be fine with that. But you said all ammo is now in safes. If you had said the most desirable ammo is now kept in safes, it would be fine. But again, you said all ammunition. And for the record, again, there's good in this PR. This is not specifically about this PR. This is just the catalyst that allowed me to finally talk about the ongoing trend in development that I think is harmful to the game. It's harmful to players as well, especially new players. But anyway, that's my rant. It's over now. I don't know if it even made sense or not, or if I should have postponed the video this long or not. And I know some of you hate it when I talk about negative things, but I don't think ignoring it does anyone any good. Furthermore, it's my opinion that although we get cool new things all the time, I think this trend has been dragging Cataclysm downhill. And I don't know, I just I wanted to say that out loud, I guess. This is why I haven't been playing the game. This is why I don't really enjoy playing anymore. It's why everything on my channel has largely grinded to a halt. I just am tired of the game punishing me in ways that don't make sense. Anyway, I don't know, let's just go back to the main video that was recorded previously. I'm sure this dragged the whole show down, and I'm sure, you know, I always get comments where people are like, this is unprofessional, you should be more even-tempered, and you should, you know, care less about this. But I don't know, man. You can only look at stuff for so long, seeing the same trends, seeing the same patterns, and no one doing anything about it before you get frustrated. And I happen to have a YouTube channel where, you know, I can publicly state these things and make my points known. That's part of the benefit of me having the channel. So anyway, let's go back to the main video. Sorry, I guess, but also I feel like we need to talk about these things. Alright, and then finally today from WAP Caplet, we got the implementation of a cardio system. Now, this is something that exists behind the scenes. The player does not directly see the impact of cardio. Now, to break it down into a very simple explanation, this takes a few things that we'll talk about in a moment, smushes them all together, and then determines the player's stamina. This means that you can now expand and shrink your stamina pool based on your behavior. Now, this was a code-heavy change, and as always, I want to state that I'm not the best at reading code, so some of this information may be slightly wrong. However, from what I was able to understand, it looks like your maximum stamina will now be affected by many things that you can directly control rather than being a fixed amount. So there will be a base stamina that your character has, and then you can improve it by improving your BMR, your athletic skill, by being healthier, having modifying traits, and by burning calories over time. Anyway, since your BMR factors into stamina, you can pretty well assume that if you're massively over or underweight, you will be penalized on stamina. Now, I don't have firm numbers on what weights exactly will cause the most problems, and again, it is a hidden system, so I had a hard time poking through BMR. Now, the athletic skill is used exclusively for swimming as of the time of this recording. I have not seen anything in this PR that changed that. I would love to see the athletic skill expanded so that it increases as you sprint rather than just through swimming, but like I said, I don't think this change actually happened yet. However, this does finally give you some small reason to care about the athletics trait, which for most players, including myself, has never been anywhere near a priority. So now, increasing your athletic skill will have some admittedly small impact, but an impact nonetheless on your maximum stamina. Then we have the health system. This is of course the hidden health stat, not your HP. The hidden health stat is modified by lots of things and is in general a really not great system, so I won't be breaking it down here. If you're unfamiliar though, ask an experienced player, they may be able to explain it to you. I'm not really good at explaining those things. However, it's safe to assume that poor health characters or morbidly obese characters will struggle a lot with sprinting. Higher weight characters get a health stat that gets capped in the negative, which is why it will negatively impact your stamina. As for modifying traits that I saw in this PR, it was indefatigable, which I don't know how to say, hyperactive, and languorous. There may be others, but these were the three that I noticed. Indefatigable and hyperactive positively affect your maximum stamina, and languorous lowers maximum stamina. It's possible in the future that people will make other traits that modify your stamina pool or the rate at which you gain max stamina, things like that. And then finally, we have burning calories over time. Burning a lot of calories in a day will gradually increase your cardio modifiers and should increase your stamina over time. Now, since it's a brand new system, I don't know how impactful these things are or how fast the gain stamina rate actually is. However, since you can manipulate this by simply burning calories, this means that, cutting down trees, doing a lot of combat, those things will positively affect you. This also means that using the workout function in the game will contribute in some small way to your gradual stamina gain. It is still used for burning calories, but that now comes with the side benefit of improving your cardio. Now, there may be other factors to this. Like I said, there were a lot of changes and many of them were C++, which I only have a very tenuous grasp on. And the idea here isn't to break down every single thing or to allow you to min-max the system, it's just to let you know about some new cool mechanic. But now that I've done that, let's talk about it on a macro scope. I think that tracking player cardio and having the system tied to stamina pools is actually fantastic. We've talked about these sort of systems forever. I'm pretty sure Urk had taken a stab at it a while back, and I'm glad that it's finally appearing in some way, and I'm generally on board for anything that allows you to improve your character over time. It is realistic for a character to get better at stamina the more that they do hard work and by raising their athletics skill. It also makes sense to use BMI as a metric. A character's weight does impact stamina, and it looked like in my reading that heavier characters would be penalized most heavily for this, but I'd like to see something that does penalize underweight characters as well, or maybe that's already in there and I just missed it. But yeah, I think this is probably my favorite change this week. I'm glad it has made its way into the game, and hopefully I provided enough information that you understand the basics of it. It hasn't been in the game long enough for me to have really played with it and fully wrap my brain around all the details, but I do believe ultimately this will be a beneficial thing for most players. And with that, internet, I think we're going to call today's episode. If you watched this far into the episode, well, you're one of the only people who has. Leave me a comment and say, hey, I watched the whole thing. Thank you so much for watching. I of course will be back in a couple weeks with another episode, and I will see you next time.